filed a lawsuit that was used in this case was Cassie. And there's over 100 lawsuits. So what does that say? That says the lawsuits are all nonsense.
Wrong. You know, I listened to you.
I'm wrong?
Some of
which of your clients was used in this case?
Let's be clear about something.
Which of your clients was used in this case?
Hey, listen very carefully. If the alleged assault happened in LA, there was nobody flown in, there was nobody coerced and trafficked across state lines, they wouldn't use the client, obviously. These cases that we have filed in New York are filed under a New York statute for sexual assault and sexual abuse. That's completely different than transportation for prostitution or for sexual trafficking, and certainly has nothing to do with RICO. So you just made this grand conclusion that, the U.S. attorney talked to a few of these folks and decided they had no credibility. You are flat out wrong in that respect, because
none of them were used. None of them were used. How am I wrong if none of them were used?
Decided is that there was nothing that happened across state lines, and there was no sexual trafficking, which is what the case was all about. So it has nothing to do with whether these people were credible or not. Their case is a civil case alleging state law claims of assault after being drugged. That was not the case that was brought by the U.S. attorney, and frankly, that's not a case that could be brought by the U.S. attorney, and which is the point
your own client accused Jay-Z and Diddy of raping her when she was 13, and we all saw it was all nonsense. It was absolutely false. It was absolutely false. She said Good Charlotte was there. They weren't there. She was 13 years old. Her own father said it was all nonsense. Jay-Z sued you over that. Come on.
I am Savvy Mike in this. I am Savvy Mike TV. And well, a few days ago, we had a heated argument between DJ Vlad and Tony Buzzbee when they were talking about Diddy. Now, Vlad vehemently believes that Diddy beat the Ricos, and you know, he's an innocent man and he should be let out of prison, while Tony Buzzbee, I believe, has not only a few cases against Diddy, but had a few cases against Jay-Z and is in court with Jay-Z at the moment because Jay-Z countersued him. So, you know, that's him. That's this guy, this white man, the other white man by Vlad, you know. Then the other white man over on the other side, the left, is Piers Morgan. Shout out to Piers Morgan. I actually fuck with what he's doing over there on his platform. I find it very entertaining. I like debates. I like heated debates, and he brings on everybody. He spares no expense. He goes and gets Candace Owens and have her talk to this person, this person, talk to that person. I'm not mad at it. But anyways, let's get into Vlad and Tony Buzzbee's dispute. We're going to, of course, get the context, and I don't know when they start arguing. At some point they do. But let's listen.
Ultimately, he was convicted of prostitution. She was involved in the prostitution. Every male escort that I talked to said that she was the one picking the actual male prostitutes. She would book them. She enjoyed every experience. She was sort of guiding the whole thing while they were together, and she was the one that actually paid them. Ultimately, this is a domestic violence case that's ballooned into a RICO and sex trafficking and so forth. What Diddy did to Cassie in that hallway was absolutely horrible, but that is not what the trial was about. It was about RICO. It was about sex trafficking, neither of which made sense in this particular trial. And if you want to actually convict him for prostitution, Cassie is just as liable for that same prostitution that Diddy got convicted of, but she was given immunity in the whole situation. So I just feel it's really just a messed up situation.
That's a completely ridiculous stance, because you know what the consequences of her, not booking those prostitutes? We saw it in that hallway in the hotel, in an international chain hotel, that were happy to take $50,000 to wipe it off the face of the earth. Those are the consequences. If she hadn't done that, it is very likely that she would have been manhandled in that way, even in the street, and someone would have been able to wipe the footage of that. I appreciate the fact that she hold on.
Case, which has nothing to do with
I appreciate the fact that she
was not charged with domestic violence. You're talking about a totally different situation.
I guess the question, Vlad, I guess the question that Esther's posing there really is, did she go along so apparently consensually with all the freak-off stuff, with all these escorts, because she admitted
to that?
Well, hang on. My question is, did she go along?
Now, I don't often agree with Vlad. I rarely do, and I kind of don't like how he turned up on her. I don't know. Like, he just got overly, like, I've never seen or heard Vlad get that aggressive. Like, he just got over, like he was getting mad that a black woman was questioning him. That's what it felt like. But outside of that, I have no problems with Vlad. like I said, I don't agree with him often, But this time I will have to agree with him. Now, while I do still believe Cassie is a victim, I've said that. Let that be known over here on this channel at I Am Savvy Mike TV. But at the same time, he does make a great point. Everything that Diddy was found guilty of, Cassie could have been found guilty of as well, like federally, because we have her on the stand testifying to the fact that she was helping set up not one, not two, multiple freak offs. So she's just as liable for the charges that Diddy got as he is. So I do agree with Vlad there, but I do agree with the black woman here as well. I don't know her name, unfortunately. I'm sorry, but I agree with her as well that Cassie was still a victim, and who's to say what if that footage doesn't come out? He probably gets caught beating on her somewhere else, and then that footage gets scrubbed as well. So I agree with both in a sense.
With it in the apparently consensual way, because she was in fear of retribution from Diddy in a way we saw with the beating.
No, I don't think so. At the end of the day, this was an artist that had one hit song 20-something years ago. She had the ability to leave at any point. She was signed to a label, but labels leave artists that don't react constantly. She could have went. She stayed because she wanted to be in that particular situation. Now, people are going to argue with me and so forth, but at the end of the day, she stayed because there was no one else that was offering her a record deal. There's no one else that was spending millions of dollars on her. There's no one else that was showering her with gifts. So she decided to stay. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when the money ran out, when she married a broke fitness trainer and had to go move back in with her parents and the money completely ran out, then it's like, okay, let's sue Diddy and let's get $20 million out of him. That is my take on it. That's always been my take. That always will be my take.
Okay, Tony Buzzbee, let me bring you in here. Just first off, what do we think is going to happen to Diddy here? What sentence are you anticipating?
I'm expecting 2 to 4 years, I would expect. I mean, he's not going to get 20 years, obviously. He's already has time served. There's going to be some mitigating factors. He doesn't have a prior record. However, there are some issues within the case that might be reasons for the judge to go a little bit higher than perhaps normal. But I would expect 2 to 4 years.
What is your feeling? You've obviously represented many Diddy victims in civil actions. You had over 100 people come to you with various allegations. What impact does this verdict have on the suits that you want to proceed with?
Zero. I mean, I was listening to Vlad there for a minute, and I'm sure that same kind of argument took place in the jury room. I mean, people have a hard time putting their head around a situation where somebody might consent one day and not consent the next. And there are people in this world that believe, well, you've consented once, so therefore you're consenting for life. That is not what the law says, and I can understand why there may have been people on that jury that had the same point of view, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying that there's a lot of psychological issues here that people really don't understand about trauma bonding and how somebody might feel compelled to do something that they really don't want to do. But even if they said no one time, that is not consent. And I think in this trial, and we didn't have the benefit, or at least I didn't have the benefit of watching it day to day and seeing each witness and hearing how they said the things they said. All I was able to see was the transcript that I would receive on a daily basis. Obviously, the jury thought that the RICO situation was complete baloney. They thought, apparently, that this was not a RICO situation. There was no conspiracy, and they were trying to put a round peg into a square hole or vice versa. I did think that, given the testimony that I saw, that there were instances where Cassie and Jane were forced to do things either through financial pressure or through extortion type pressure or through force, things that they did not want to do.
But the interesting thing on that, Tony, is that the jury clearly did not believe either woman when it came to any issue about consensuality. They just didn't believe any of it. I think pretty much across the board, it was clear they had not bought in to the suggestion that any of this was non-consensual.
No question. I mean, I think you're right. And sometimes juries do things that we don't expect. I go back to whether, each instance that this happened, did he have consent each time? Then I see Vlad's point. There were times when when it looks like that Cassie was involved in setting some of these
Well, there's
events.
no question of that. I interviewed the Punisher, the guy who gave evidence. He gave very powerful, eloquent evidence. And I've interviewed him several times. He's a very good talker, and he had no real kind of skin in the game. In fact, he was brought from the prosecution to give evidence, but actually ended up being a pretty powerful witness for the defense, it turned out, because what he said was everything was done through Cassie Ventura and seemed very consensual. Went on for over 2 years, a dozen or so encounters in hotels where Diddy just sat in the corner saying nothing. She booked him, she paid him, she organized it. Everything was driven by her. She seemed to have a good time. Everyone was happy. I thought that was very powerful evidence, actually, for Diddy, because it seemed to contradict everything that they were trying to position it as, which was this was all coercion.
Let me offer this up. The government settled in on using 2 alleged victims. They used Cassie and they used Jane. Early on, when this all started, we were contacted by the U.S. Attorney, and they asked us, can we speak to some of your clients? So we went to, and they told us, these are the ones we want to speak to. We made those people available. They talked to a couple of those people. But I think by that point, their team had decided that they had what they needed. They had the goods, if you will, to proceed with Jane and with Cassie. I think that was a mistake. I will say, as I watched the trial, or at least learned about the trial daily as it went on, I thought the government was doing what they needed to do to get a conviction. Obviously, that wasn't the case. Obviously, they did not believe that they believed that Diddy had consent, and they didn't believe there was a conspiracy. And obviously, the transportation to commit prostitution, that was pretty cut and dried. And I think everybody, no matter which side you fall out on, believed that there would be a conviction there.
But there is a point, isn't there, that which Vlad made, I thought, pretty compellingly, that if you're going to convict Diddy and you don't believe that it was non-consensual and Cassie did all the booking, why is she not being charged? And could it be that the reason that she turned on Diddy was to preempt potentially some legal exposure herself?
Who knows? We'll never know that. They gave her immunity early on, and they that's the horse they rode with, and we see what happened.
Well, I don't think it's that cut and dry. I think consent without fear of consequences is not, with fear of consequences, not actually consent. So if you were going against Cassie, for example, and you're going to try her, all she has to do is show you that video and just say, look at what happens if I didn't do that. Now, I don't think it reached the threshold for the jury for RICO, which I completely understand. Like I said, a conspiracy that involves one is a thought. But this is why I say this is not a problem for the courts. It's a problem for culture and society. Cassie met P. Diddy when she was 17 years old. She signed a 10-album deal with P. Diddy by the age of like 20 or 21, which is virtually unheard of in this industry. I mean, I'm sorry, she wasn't Beethoven. She didn't have the kind of talent that would warrant that kind of record deal. She was clearly groomed. Now, amongst all of that, could you say she could have got up and left? Okay, arguably, yes.
She was with him 10 years.
Yes, but the thing is, he had
She was with him 10 years, and the Punisher was very clear.
Yes,
She did not give any impression to him of being anything but a very enthusiastic and willing participant. It's quite kinky stuff.
Look at what happened when she tried to break up with him and date, what's his name, the rapper, who had his car blown up. I mean, it's not that cut and dry. I feel like Cassie.
But Esther, we have lots of chats through the Me Too era and stuff, and obviously one of the things people are saying about this is that, in a way, it signals the beginning of the end of that Me Too movement, because for a long time, everyone was encouraged to believe women accusers. The moment they made allegations, they had to be believed. That was always, to me, a very dangerous proposition. It should always be they should be taken seriously, the allegations should be investigated properly, and then decisions should be made about whether there had been a crime. Very dangerous to believe accusers before you actually know whether they're telling the truth. But here we've got a situation, I think, where if he'd been in this case 3-4 years ago, he would have gone down. I
don't think
the jury, I suspect, has moved with the times.
I think the whole Me Too issue was a separate kind of beast. P. Diddy and the environment that he exists, the hip hop industry, is a completely different kind of sleaze. And also, it was very cut and dry from that video.
Is it though? Is it any different to Harvey Weinstein, who claimed that a lot of what his stuff was transactional? I mean, he was convicted of rape and sexual abuse and so on. So obviously, again, juries didn't agree. But he painted a picture of a lot of kind of transactional relationships with people, right? Where he believed this was all part of the sort of casting couch deal. That again has been, that's dinosaur stuff and was outrageous and wrong and everything else, and it turned out to be criminal as well. But I don't think there's much difference in the attitude.
There is a difference. I think hip hop has always come under fire for being quite sleazy. I mean, you can't listen to a hip hop track from 20 years ago without hearing the N-word or bitch. It's always been quite sleazy. They've always been quite actually vocal about the fact that they treat women like pieces of meat. And the women, a lot of the time, are happy to be treated that way because they get a lot from it.
So that's interesting, isn't it, Vlad? Because that is part of that hip hop culture. There's no doubt. A lot of women have embraced that kind of, very misogynist language, the lyrics and so on and so on. Is your feeling about what happened here with Cassie Ventura and Diddy that she was, notwithstanding the violence which would erupt more than once, we know there were other occasions when he was violent to her, that she enjoyed her life around this superstar rapper, notwithstanding that?
I don't understand the question. Can you...
that she accepted the violence and was prepared to stay in the relationship because she enjoyed everything else.
I think there was a very violent relationship. I think it was a drug-fueled relationship. I think there was lots of money and fame and jet-setting involved. At the end of the day, I think what happened to her was horrible. I think that tape showed just how bad the domestic violence was. But at the end of the day, this is not what the trial was about. The trial was about RICO. The trial was about sex trafficking. The trial was about prostitution. In fact, the only reason Diddy got convicted was because it was interstate commerce. All the other male escorts that I've talked to, like, for example, I talked to Don the dealer, who also had multiple sessions with Cassie. She said she was loving it. She was into it. She was setting the direction. At the end of the day, you could stay in a bad relationship, but you decide to stay in that bad relationship. This is really about the domestic violence, but the domestic violence goes back past the statute of limitations. So if you think about it, in this whole case, all the escorts I talked to were not, sent to a different state or a different country. They were all local. Like Don the dealer was in Miami. Punisher was in New York. If all these guys didn't travel across state lines, there would be no case at all. None whatsoever.
Yeah.
And with Tony Buzzbee, at the end of the day, like he said, that the feds talked to multiple people that he's representing that were suing, but they decided not to use any of them, which makes me think that there wasn't any real credible, real evidence that they actually did anything wrong in the whole situation. Therefore, there's only two people that were actually used. The only person that was that filed a lawsuit that was used in this case was Cassie. And there's over 100 lawsuits. So what does that say? That says the lawsuits are all nonsense.
I listened to you. And some of
which of your clients was used in this case?
Let's be clear about something.
Which of your clients was used in this case?
Hey, listen very carefully. If the alleged assault happened in LA, there was nobody flown in, there was nobody coerced and trafficked across state lines, they wouldn't use the client, obviously. These cases that we have filed in New York are filed under a New York statute for sexual assault and sexual abuse. That's completely different than transportation for prostitution or for sexual trafficking, and certainly has nothing to do with RICO. So you just made this grand conclusion that, the U.S. attorney talked to a few of these folks and decided they had no credibility. You are flat out wrong in that respect, because
none of them were used. None of them were used. How am I wrong if none of them were used? What's the
is that there was nothing
evidence
that happened across state lines, and there was no sexual trafficking, which is what the case was all about. So it has nothing to do with whether these people were credible or not. Their case is a civil case alleging state law claims of assault after being drugged. That was not the case that was brought by the U.S. attorney. And frankly, that's not a case that could be brought by the U.S. attorney, and which is the point
your own
that
client accused Jay-Z and Diddy of raping her when she was 13, and we all saw it was all nonsense. It was absolutely false. It was absolutely false. She said Good Charlotte was there. They weren't there. She was 13 years old. Her own father said it was all nonsense. Jay-Z sued you over that. Come on. Like, you have a long history, not credible
give you a little
people.
bit of information,
a long history.
Make all these broad
a long history.
You don't even know what you're talking about.
Have you won a single lawsuit with any of these people you've represented? A single lawsuit.
Literally 30 days ago for $640 million, pal. So don't be telling me about winning lawsuits. I've won more lawsuits than any lawyer in the United States. So I don't hear
with Jay-Z. How many lawsuits have you won against Diddy and Jay-Z? How many lawsuits have you won against Diddy and Jay-Z?
None have went to trial yet, knucklehead. Think about it. They don't just file a case, go to trial. Wait and see.
Won nothing.
Okay, let me just jump. All right, look, the reality is the reality is we're going to find out, right? We'll find. We're going to find out, Vlad. We're going to find out, Vlad, whether any of these civil cases do end up.
None of them will be won. Maybe one or two will be settled because of their headaches.
Okay,
well, there are over 100 people.
The one thing I do find very distasteful is there are reports that Diddy got a standing ovation in prison when he returned from this verdict because
people like Vlad.
Because his lawyer said that they love the idea of him beating the feds. And when you watch that video, when you watch the video of him beating up Cassie Ventura, the idea that guy becomes any kind of hero, I think, would stick in all our gullet. Can we agree on that?
He's not exactly an esteemed company. He's in a prison.
But he's not. He shouldn't be treated as a hero.
Of course not. And I mean some of the.
Yeah, come on now, Piers Morgan. He's in jail. This nigga just beat 3 of his 5 charges. Of course, they started cheering. He was like, "Yeah, Diddy. As soon as you get out, try to get me out, my nigga. They was trying to get the plug." It was like, tell one of your lawyers to get on my case, Diddy, please. Either way, that was entertaining, though. That was entertaining, but Vlad is right. Like, when it comes down to Jay-Z or Diddy, Tony Buzzbee, like, yeah, you can flex. Oh, I just won this case. Or, no, when it comes, we were talking about Diddy and Jay-Z, my nigga. Have you won cases against them? And then she has said, well, it's 100 more. It's over 100 victims. That's a lot of cases. That's a lot of cases. And I don't think Tony Buzzbee is just going to keep out giving his services for free. just to get one to stick. Like, oh, I got him. Like, I don't think he cares that much. But at the end of the day, we shall see. Look, after Diddy, I guess, goes through these sentences and whatnot, then he'll have to face these lawsuits. And we'll see if they stick or not. Till then, they gotta wait. Everybody gotta wait. Diddy still got lawsuits to deal with, I guess. I guess this shit, Diddy thought it was over. I mean, you beat the feds. It's over enough. And it will, unfortunately, Tony Buzzbee is definitely going to help his case. It is. The judge is going to see that and be like, well, what you're, trying to expose here, you, Lil Rod, whoever, kind of got proven that he was not guilty for. So what are we doing here? But we shall see. I'm not a lawyer and I ain't a judge. So we'll see how it plays out. Yeah, he called Vlad a knucklehead. You knucklehead, Vlad. You're a knucklehead, Vlad. Holy shit. Anyways, I am Savvy Mike in this. So I am Savvy Mike TV. Peace.